Hi, I'm with the Lacroix Cruiser, and today we have a very special guest. Her name is Cole, and the bus is
Encounter America.
Encounter America. Now, Cole has a very interesting story, to say the least. An unfortunately interesting story, but it has a happy ending. So don't worry, don't stress out. We're doing well. Cole had this bus built by a quote-unquote professional builder. And I'll link a video in the description. Another channel did a video basically a few days after you got the bus, something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you'll see just how unprofessional this professional builder was. That being said, Cole, like I said, a very happy ending. She's gone over and above and has embraced the bus and bus life and is moving forward despite the, let's say, the little trauma that was suffered.
We can definitely
Big
say
trauma. Yeah. So, first of
Yeah.
all, why bus life? What interested you in getting into a bus?
So, I'm a graduate student working on a PhD, and I'm in my 5th year, and I've finished my requirements, and I no longer needed to live in Boston and pay Boston rent.
Yeah.
And I love to travel. I grew up in the Foreign Service,
Okay.
so that's in my blood. And I figured, let me wander,
Yeah.
let me explore, let me, enjoy the novelty of new cities, new places, new people, and be able to do my work remotely. So all I basically need at this point for this year is access to the internet, and
Yeah.
I can do my research and my preparation, and that's what I was thinking. So it kind of came together really nicely at first. So that's what the impetus was. I was like, I'm ready to do something different, and downsizing was the other impetus. I have all this furniture from an old life, and moving with all of that didn't make sense. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? Do I need all of this anymore? And I really didn't.
No.
So, Facebook Marketplace downsized pretty quickly and pretty easily, which was
Yeah.
really nice. And really got the ball rolling for this plan around March and April, when I started making inquiries to friends and people who might know builders and so forth.
Yeah. And why a bus versus an RV or a van?
Right. So vans are ultra expensive,
Yes.
despite how tiny and beautiful they are. Way out of my budget. RVs also can be very, very expensive. I have to be honest, I would adore an Airstreamer. It's just classic. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's definitely some folks who've renovated. But then the other expense for me would be to have to get a vehicle that could tow that. And that would be, an additional expense that I don't want to do at the
Exactly.
moment and really can't do. So thinking through all the options, Skoolie seemed like the best choice because it's not only a home, but I can drive it. And I was originally thinking of going a little bit smaller, but ended up with this about 35-foot bus,
Yeah.
11 windows, and was really excited when I found it, and I actually got the bus from the builders who had just purchased it and drove it down from New York to Florida, so they
Okay.
knew that it drove well. So that was a plus.
Yeah. Good. And how did the process go to find the builder? So.
Right. Yeah, so I have a lot of friends in the biker community in Boston, because I do photography as a side gig, if you
Yeah.
will. And I have a photography project called Encounter Boston, where I go and explore and meet people and see different sites of the city. And I've ended up doing lots of portraits, and I met folks from this biker community. It was actually a biker community started by 2 women, and they were real community builders. They like to be inclusive with the folks that they have. So it was all bikes, all types, and
Yeah.
it wasn't cliquey, right?
Right.
And so I really was excited about, the folks I met there, made a lot of great friends there. And I figured these are a great pool of people to ask, because a lot of them are mechanically inclined themselves. A lot of them, do their own builds on
Yeah.
their bikes and so on. Some of them are, camper kind of folks and so forth. So I thought, let me ask them. So I inquired of the woman who started one of the women who started the organization. I said, hey, do you know anybody? And she recommended a friend of hers who
Okay.
does woodworking, and had converted a couple buses, smaller buses. And so I got in touch with her. And her name was Kristen. Her name is Kristen Baum. And, my conversations with her from the very beginning were great. She was very responsive. She was giving me lots of information. We were looking over different bus options.
Yeah.
She would give me pros and cons. She was very communicative, very responsive. So from the outset of working with her, I was pretty confident.
Yes.
You know, because she had been very forthright, very clear, talked about pros and cons with me, and that made me feel confident that she knew what she was doing.
Right. And then the proverbial hit the fan.
Yes.
Okay.
Pretty much.
So you were dealing with Kristen,
Mm-hmm.
and then who did she transfer you off to?
Right. So the time I got in touch with Kristen, she and her partner, boyfriend, were moving down from the New York, Long Island area to Clearwater to start their new business.
Yeah.
They wanted to do projects like this more extensively.
Mm-hmm.
And so her partner, his name is Alexander Bruno, and he goes by Alexander Van Gogh.
Okay.
So he clearly had a little bit of a foot in the door of the van building, schooly world. And but most of my negotiations and conversations were with her.
Okay.
He was a bit brusque and a bit narcissistic and, a little too much for me. And he knew that I didn't like that. So there was a little friction. But when I dealt with her, very professional. So I came down to Florida end of May.
Mm-hmm.
And to go over options with them, to discuss the business plan, if you will, or the build project, to look at buses.
Yes.
And, again, this was professionally, set up this time, we arranged the visit, we sat down and had a conversation, wrote possibilities out. I told them my budget, they told me possibilities.
Right.
They said, for this amount we could do this, for that amount we could do that, we could do a solar for this amount, we could do like a 1,200 watt array and a generator for this amount, we could do a 1,600 watt array, which they promised me would be fully off grid, for this amount.
Yeah.
And so we created estimates,
Mm-hmm.
proper legitimate estimates with all the details.
Yeah.
And then I agreed to that. And then we worked on a plan to pay quarterly and, kind of see the work progress. And we had a deadline. So from June 1st, when I purchased this bus.
June 1st, 2021.
2022.
June 1st, 2022.
Yes.
Okay.
I purchased the bus, got the title in hand, and then they began the work. And they got their, eventually they got their first payment. They started with the flooring. And I could progressively see the work being done through videos. They were vlogging, if you will, via Instagram, the progress of the bus, and then we were constantly in touch and talking about what was coming next and what they needed to purchase next and so forth.
Excellent. The build process actually went fairly smoothly.
Well, at first it seemed that way.
At first, okay.
Yes.
And where did it go downhill?
So the main three people who worked on the bus were Kristen herself, her boyfriend Alex, and they brought in a friend, Patrick, who really did quite a bit of the woodworking and the framing and so on. And he did a great job for many of the things he did. Patrick was one who also did the solar install, but that's where something went wrong.
Yes.
So keep in mind, I'm able to observe and keep in contact with them, see the progress of the build, and from my perspective, it's going along pretty well. And then I did all my downsizing. I did my putting stuff in storage. I wrapped up my life in Boston.
Yeah.
Got a U-Haul, and my little Rogue and drove from Boston to Florida. So I arrived on August 3rd. And now remember, my delivery date was technically going to be July 31st. So they were planning to have this build complete from June 1st to July 3rd. That's 2 full months, right? Right. And they didn't actually start laying the floor until almost like the 18th or 19th of June. So there had been a huge chunk of time where things were just not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Anyway, nonetheless, when I actually got on site, now I knew there would be a little bit of delay. There's always going to be some kind of delay when you're doing any kind of construction, right? So I had some flexibility there. I said, okay, I'm going to get an Airbnb for a little while. And they know that I'm downsizing. They know that I've just hauled my whole life in boxes to the, to Clearwater. Yeah, exactly. And so it's not like they don't know that my whole life is literally on hold until the bus is ready for me, right?
Right.
Now, mind you, I'm still technically studying. I have deadlines.
Yes.
I've got meetings, right? So when I actually get on site and I do the first walkthrough of the bus, I see that the paneling in the roof is like uneven, and I'm like, hey, I thought you ran these through the planer. And they're like, we did. Didn't you see the video? I was like, yeah, I did, but they're uneven though. And then they gave me like some kind of excuse of, well, all the boards are different and, because we used pallet wood.
Yeah.
To cut costs rather than buying fresh, 2x4s or whatever the case may be. So anyway, this whole process of like beginning to observe it in person started making me ask questions. And then I saw the skylights, which I did not ask for. I had asked, and had in writing, by the way, to do max air fans, right?
Which I don't see any.
They're not here.
Yeah.
And, you know, I got promised at least one would be put in by the bathroom area, which would make sense because you want to vent, you know, for like all the moisture collection and so on. And it wasn't there. And then I said, when I saw it, the minute I stepped on the bus, I said, did you guys check this for waterproofing? And they said, yeah. I said, okay. And then, you know, they began to show me things. And one thing that happened a lot where I started to get really uncomfortable is they were bringing people onto the bus to show it off to other people. And my stuff was on here. My brand new cushions, you know, all of these cushions and things I bought and had sent to them so that it could get ready. And, you know, my belongings are on here, right, from the U-Haul.
Yeah.
And I was like, why would you bring random strangers onto the bus? Like, you know, so beginning to get very uneasy with them when I was here. And then, mind you, again, I had dealt with Kristen directly most of the time, and that was great. But then talking to and dealing with her boyfriend, his cavalier attitude, his kind of like flippant behavior really made me uncomfortable. And that's when I was beginning to get tense, like, okay, something's not right here. And then I'm in a conundrum because what do I do?
Yeah. You no longer have a home.
Right.
This is the home. You've given them money already.
Right. I'm 3/4 in.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, what the hell do I do? And I was beginning to get uneasy. So they kept starting with delays. Like, we're not ready yet, or we need more time to do this, or, you know, a part's not here, or, you know, our AC HVAC guy is not ready yet.
Yes.
Right? They had all kinds of stories.
Mm-hmm.
Frankly, they were mostly lies, and I'm pretty confident of that.
Yeah.
You know, I had seen them interact with people prior to my build, like they were doing side projects, like small construction things.
Yeah.
And I heard them, like, give some bogus answer to somebody after they had had a conversation in front of me about what they were doing.
Oh, okay.
So I had observed that already.
Yeah.
And, you know, it made me a little weary, but, you know, that was a red flag that I should have paid more attention to. Nonetheless, you know, they started doing that with me.
Yes.
And you can tell, you know. But then, for example, one day I came on the bus to observe, and Alex turns on the gas stove, which is supposed to be a gas stove, but it's not a gas stove. It's hooked up to propane. And what do you think happens when the flames came up?
They would be really large flames because propane and gas are not the same thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So he turns it on, it goes woof. Mind you, this is a wood interior, and I'm like, oh my God. But here, again, it's like, you know, it's some of the feedback we got when the video came out was like, well, you should have had everything in writing, and you should have had a contract, and da da da. And I did. And the thing is, people don't understand two things. One, gender dynamics, right? Like this guy is like talking down to me and like BSing his way out of whatever I'm critiquing, right? So there's that. So what do you do with that? And two, it doesn't matter if you're working with a high level company to a small operation like this, because I met folks who've worked with Airstream, for example, and had issues with somebody who did a repair and like are going back and forth, right? Exactly. Meanwhile, they still have damaged floors and wood that's, you know, been, the water has leaked on it and so forth, right? And then I've been speaking to people in the schooly community at all levels. People have gone through various problems. Like somebody else worked with a mechanic from a mid-level company that they put the wrong gear in the engine, it stripped the engine, and they're still in negotiation with this, right? So what I think is important for people to realize is, despite what level type company you're working with, what level builder you're working with, there's the potential for things to always go wrong.
Yes.
There's a potential for contracts to be ignored, agreements to be ignored, and then having to do this chase with the person who promised you something and didn't deliver, right? So I think that's important to remember. But nonetheless, when you're already like 3/4 in, right, what do you do? Yeah,
and the funds that you had are already in their hands.
Exactly.
So there's no backing away. Now, I know pertinently that, you know, I was in communication with you during this or after you took final, or quote, final delivery of the bus, and with Jonathan, and I know you actually offered them, to me, was a very kind way out, which was buy the bus back from me.
Yeah, and you know why the interesting thing about that is I cannot tell you how many times they said to me, oh, this bus is worth so much more than you're paying for it. You're getting such a deal. They really tried to make it out to be like they were doing some kind of favor to me. And I'm like, you're not doing me a favor. I'm paying you. This is what you told me it was going to cost, and I've paid it properly and on time.
Exactly.
You're not doing me a favor. You're working for me. So
Right.
quit talking like you're making, this big,
No,
gift to me.
No, they screwed up on their estimate.
Yes?
Yes.
And that's not my problem.
No, exactly.
And I talked about budget with them right from the get-go. Like, this is my limit. And, if they don't know their own business, that's not my fault, right?
Yes.
So, anyway, the other thing that that's interesting about that is not only did they, not give the correct budget, but again, going back to estimates, oh, this is worth $600,000. Oh, you can be in this for a year and probably sell it for $100,000. They were really
All over
hyping
the map.
hyping this up. And they kept saying too, oh, we had friends come see it and they wanted to buy it right on the spot. Mm-hmm. Oh, you're gonna have so much attention. So they were, it's a quality of a narcissist to hype you up.
Yes.
All right. Well, that was coming in thick, coming in strong.
Yes.
So going back to that option, so I contacted Jonathan almost right away. So once I had the bus, what do you think happened? These
beautiful skylights.
Immediately were pouring rain, right? In
they were
rainy
rain
Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were rain lights. If you wanted to take a new shower, we had 2 new options.
Right.
And again, like I told you, I was really uncomfortable feeling like, should I put a halt to this build prior to contacting Jonathan, or should I just get the bus and then deal with it later and have an assessment done properly and then kind of negotiate from there? And a friend of mine who's a mechanic, he was like, well, they've, you're 3/4 in, they've been somewhat communicative. Like, they never stopped communicating with me, which is a good thing.
Yes.
And he's like, well, have them finish and then have it assessed and go from there. Because, this is my property at this point. And I was a little concerned, to be honest, that they might withhold it in some way. And then I'd have to fight them to actually just get the bus. And keep in mind, again, my belongings are here, right?
Right.
So I didn't want to be put in that position where I'd have to, literally fight for all my own belongings.
Yes.
And so that's part of the reason I accepted the bus as it was. So back to the skylights, things started leaking. And I contacted folks, got in touch with Jonathan. Jonathan literally came out within a day of me speaking with him to come do a full assessment.
Yes.
And that was a great help because I felt one, very supported, 2, somebody who's got some sense about what should be done properly, and evidence to be able to have a little more force in communicating back. And so when the assessment came out, one of the options was, yes, buy this bus back. You said it was worth so much. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Take it back. No response.
No. And by the way, Jonathan is Sojourner's Way.
Yes.
So he's the owner and the brain behind Sojourner's Way. But so that was one of the options presented to them. Another option was fix it.
Yeah. And I didn't want their hands back on this bus. No doubt, right? Because remember, when it started leaking, I did have them come and they promised to patch it up. Because one of the things they promised me as well is that they would be around to fix anything that needed attention after I received the bus. This is something we talked about from the very beginning of negotiations, all through.
Yes.
They knew that I was going to stay in the area for that very express purpose. Yeah. And I actually asked for a warranty in writing more than once.
Right.
And even in the text message history, I said, so can you please send me the warranty? And he says, I will guarantee the woodwork for 25 days.
Yeah.
I was like, that's your warranty? He said, yep, that's it.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So they weren't willing to stand by their work.
No, because 25 days is not long.
What's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And they made excuses, too. They said, oh, the bus is leaking. It's a 20-year-old bus. We're like, that's not the 20-year-old bus that's the problem. It's your brand new work that's the problem.
Yeah.
Right?
Because I used to live in a 50-year-old bus, and it's still not leaking. So.
Right?
Yeah.
So anyway, those options were available. I didn't want their hands back on the bus, obviously, because the patchwork he did didn't work. It didn't hold up.
Right.
There was a neighbor where I was staying when I first got the bus who literally came with painter's tape and painter's temporary tarp, and he fixed the patches, and that worked.
Yes.
Better than whatever nonsense they did. So nonetheless, what we asked as a second option was buy back materials.
Right.
Okay? if you stand, the stove that's not working properly, the water heater that's not working properly, the mishmash solar that you did, buy it back, and so forth. Again, no response.
Communication ended with the delivery of the bus, basically.
Exactly.
And so did the warranty.
Yeah.
So they gave you, in Quebec, we call it a 30-30 warranty. 30 feet or 30 seconds, whichever comes first.
That's what I got.
Yeah. And you probably got less than that.
Right.
But, okay, so now looking towards the future, looking forward, what happened to keep you in love with your bus?
I'll tell you, a couple really wonderful things happened. I wanted an adventure, Ivan, but I wasn't quite expecting this adventure.
Right.
Okay? So first of all, Jonathan really did a lot. He was in communication with me. He was very supportive, like just talking me through things, looking at options. Obviously, he physically came on site, did that tour, and then started, figuring out, and he did his video immediately, and he did the letter that we prepared immediately. So we tried to get, in communication with these folks and get something resolved literally right away.
Right.
Which I really appreciate. So that's encouraging, and that was really, really helpful. Now, mind you, I was in a lot of emotional distress, right? I am delayed. I am behind on work.
Yeah.
I don't know what is going to happen. I don't know how I'm going to live, because mind you, the bus is in Florida in the summer, in August.
Yes, with no air conditioning.
With no air conditioning, with no proper solar working, right?
Yes.
And it's so hot in here, right? And the place I was parked, I was at a home, so my hostess was so kind to let me stay there. She was actually my Airbnb hostess who really went out of her way to accommodate me, because she knew I was in a bind.
Right.
But she didn't really feel comfortable letting me hook up to shore power in her home.
I wouldn't have either.
Exactly, right?
With the way the electrical system was, no.
And so, it was so hard. So some days I would try to stay on the bus, but it was just too hot at night. So she's like, just come in the house, stay here, don't worry. And she was an amazing friend. She turned into a really good friend. Nonetheless, it was Jonathan who got the ball rolling, came out immediately to get that assessment video done. The walkthrough was really thorough. And then prepared the letter to present to the builders to offer options, right, to resolve things. And again, didn't want their hands on the bus again.
Yes.
But, here are the various options. And then, we communicated with them once, we communicated with them again, and no response.
Right.
But Jonathan was also helpful in the sense that he was really trying to encourage me to keep going, don't give up.
Yes.
He said so many people get to your position and literally just want to wash their hands of everything and walk away.
Right.
And I certainly felt like that too.
Yes.
Because it's so frustrating to have, it's already stressful to move. Moving is literally on a scale of most intense life stressors, number 2 or number 1.
Yes, exactly.
After divorce, they're kind of interchangeable.
Right.
So it's that's already, hyped up your nervous system, your emotions.
Yeah.
And then to have everything be so uncertain, it was really emotionally difficult. It was so hard to sleep for weeks for me, because I just didn't know what was going to happen. And also dealing with those builders and the way in which they dealt with me and spoke to me was also very disturbing, right?
Yes.
So that added to that. So he really, back to Jonathan, did this incredible supportive work, helped me by posting things and communicating with the Skoolie community. And he kept talking about it like, Skoolie community, we're a community, we're a community.
Yes.
And he put a post up that said, hey, Nicole, I also go by Cole, has this bus. She needs somewhere to park while we get something sorted for her. Does anybody have space that they could provide? Yeah. And 2 individuals reached out. One of them was Lester Witt, who's on the Skoolie Nation. What an amazing man and his family. They hosted me for, a good couple weeks in Ocala. Mm-hmm. And then Jonathan was able to do some of the repairs to the electrical, to the solar, and,
the hundreds of holes in the roof.
All patched up.
Yeah.
All those potential entry points for water damage patched up. Skylights properly covered, at least temporarily for now, so that there's absolutely no concern about water damage. And then, getting the solar set up. And I don't know if you remember the picture of the junction box and what a disaster that was. So, we have a new breaker box and everything, and it's beautiful and neat and pristine. Jonathan took care of that. And, he goes really out of his way. So I have to say he's really a great support in this story, you know,
Yes.
and as well as encouraging me to not give up.
Mm-hmm.
And like, let's make sure these people are accountable. Like, he also wants to make sure that this doesn't happen, and I agree, and I want to as well, that other people don't go through this, right?
No, and unfortunately, too many people go through this. Not everyone, like you say, or like Jonathan told you, a lot of people just pack up, kill their dream, and
Exactly.
move on with life. But with that, always that lump of what could have happened.
Right.
So it's beautiful that you did that and continued going. And there's, like I said, there's thousands, unfortunately, of people that you see them posting on Instagram and on Facebook, and they're getting a bus, and they got a bus, and they have a builder, and they found a builder, and everything is going well, and then they disappear.
Yep.
And it's not because they are private all of a sudden, it's because their dream got squashed. So.
And you know, that's the thing. It is a dream. It's a wish, right?
Yes.
It's like this hope and this kind of fantasy of a new life, right?
Yes.
A new future. And to have somebody kind of stamp all over that, or stomp all over it, if you will, is very heartbreaking, right?
Yes.
And so, you know, I have to say he really helped me over that hump, because again, my whole nervous system was just a wreck, right? It's not
Yes.
even just your mental state. It's like your body's feeling the stress of not having a foundation, right?
Right.
So that was definitely helpful. So again, staying with Lester's family too, they were just beautiful people,
Yes.
very kind, super generous and down to earth, and you know, just this comfort. And so those kinds of support from these people make me feel more safe.
Yes. Well, the schooly community, or the bus community, because I won't exclude, I live in a coach, and I won't exclude vans and coaches and shuttle buses and all that. We're all the same. The nomad community
Yep.
is a better term. It really is a community. We're currently at a gathering called Swarm in the Smokies, a derivative of Skoolie Swarm.
Mm-hmm.
And Skoolie Swarm is an annual event in Florida, and now they've started branching out and doing smaller swarms like this. They had one in Missouri last fall. This fall, we're in the Smoky Mountains in North Carolina. And it really is, it's like a family reunion, but without the odd uncle. So,
I mean, okay.
yeah, yeah. You know, without the uncle that everybody's sort of ashamed of in the family.
All right.
That person isn't here. But no, it really is a community. And
Yeah.
we get to see each other many occasions throughout the year. At last Skoolie Swarm in February, 2 weeks after that, Sylvie and I were at a bus gathering, or a tiny home show, in San Diego, California.
Oh, nice.
And we met people that we'd seen at other events, and some that had also come from Skoolie Swarm across the country.
Mm-hmm.
People that we're friends with are from Prince Edward Island, Canada.
Oh, wow.
They
that's quite
were
a
in
distance.
Baja, Mexico,
Wow.
and came up to the event in San Diego because we were going to be there. So it's just a great community, and the outpouring of support that you got, that you received, and you continue to receive, is a testament to how fun this community is and how actually it is a community.
Yeah.
Yeah, even though our foundations are made of rubber and we move around a lot, the actual community feeling is there, and people actually do want to help and support.
Well, you know what's interesting is I feel like it's pop-up community, you know, like we have pop-up shops that like
Yes.
people display their, you know, homemade goods or whatever the case may be. It's like pop-up community. It's like an experiment in community, right? Like
Yes.
how do we take care of each other without the force of someone else, or without, you know, some kind of outside resources? Like, we're it, right? And I see people helping each other all throughout this space we're in, you
Yes.
know, like somebody's over here lending a tool, somebody's under somebody else's bus, you know, troubleshooting. There's somebody who came and did like computer diagnostics for me, and you
Yes.
know, like for very minimal cost. And it's like all of these lovely skills and people just sharing. And there's people who have their small businesses here, you know, they're selling their art or their photography.
Exactly.
And it's very fruitful kind of environment, and fresh in many ways.
Yes.
I like that. So that's also what's sustaining me, and kind of like, okay, wow, look at this. You know, there's
Yeah.
these people who can give you some positive advice. Of course, there's always the people who weigh in with too much information sometimes too, but you know.
That happens.
Yeah, right?
But yeah, well, that's the odd uncle. But yeah, and you know, I read everything that was posted online when, you know, Jonathan first posted it there. And some people have the reflection of, well, if you're going to be in a schoolie, you should build it yourself.
Yeah, that's an interesting position to take.
Yeah, and that's something I wholeheartedly disagree with. I've built 3 buses myself. I built buses I've helped other families build their buses. I won't get into building a bus myself. It's too much like work. But that being said, yes, I have the skills and I have the time to do it myself. The skills can be learned.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone has the time. And that's what it comes down to. And a lot of people will go to a builder because that builder is selling their time.
Yep.
They're selling a bit of their skill, they're selling a bit of their knowledge, but in reality, it's a customer service business. We're selling time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you found in them. And
Exactly.
you know, a lot of people, well, how can you get duped? You explained it very well, and the communication was spectacular up until you saw the bus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then the story started rolling in,
Right.
and then the BS, and then you
Yeah.
could tell, like, oh boy, there's something not right here.
Yeah.
But now you're in it.
Yeah, exactly. So your electrical system is now fixed.
Yes.
Does the stove work?
No.
No, stove still, okay, still working on that.
Oh, I forgot to mention that the propane was put inside the bus instead
Oh.
of on the exterior. So that's another factor in this.
Yeah, okay.
So that we could see, and this is something Jonathan knew right from the get-go when I started explaining my
Yeah.
story. That he's like, I know this story. Here's what happened. They started out with this low budget. They thought they could do it. They got in over their heads.
Yeah, exactly.
And at the end, they started cutting corners. And so a lot of people will step on my bus, and it's aesthetically very nice.
Yes.
And there are a lot of great details. And the builders did do some cute things, right?
Right.
Like this beautiful
Live edge table.
live edge table is fabulous.
That
And,
they forgot to varnish. But anyways.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they varnished this side of it,
Yep. They
but
varnished.
this end isn't.
Yes, exactly. So
Yeah.
you can see there's these kinds. And by the way, again, this is saying like they didn't varnish the butcher block more than once.
Okay.
And I came in and I said, hey, you need to redo this. And hey, you need to redo this. And
Yeah.
when it came back, they said, yeah, we did it. And I was like, so what do you do as a consumer when you know and you ask good questions
Yes.
and your builder tells you, yeah, we did it, but then they didn't? So
No,
what do you do?
Unfortunately, there's nothing you can do but move forward and continue on.
So I've now bought varnish.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, a lot of people, like I said, critiquing that, well, she should have done it herself.
Right.
You didn't have the time.
No.
No, you're working on a PhD, which
Yeah.
I don't have a PhD, and I know a lot of people that do, and I know how much work that is. So it's not something, you're not just sitting there reading a book all afternoon.
Exactly.
Well,
There's a
you're
lot
sitting,
more.
you are sitting there
I'm
reading
reading
a book.
lots of books.
Yeah, exactly. So
Digesting lots.
yeah, exactly. What's the future holding for you?
So, the next step I've done, so we got that taken care of, as you
Yeah.
said. I've gotten the polyurethane and I've started refinishing things that were unfinished. 2 things. One, I am pursuing these builders.
Yes.
I have put in 2 reports in Pinellas County, Florida. One through the non-licensed contractor complaint line and one through their consumer protection. I actually heard from the consumer protection investigator on Friday driving up to Skoolie Swarm, and
Beautiful.
had a fantastic conversation with him. He told me his, what are you looking for? What is your ultimate resolution? How do you want to move forward? We discussed a couple more of the issues
Yes.
and so forth. And then he said, he told me his steps. He's like, I'm going to go visit the site, see if they're still there, because their chances. By the way, once that video came out, they scrubbed their social media.
Yes, I
They
know.
went private. They took down every picture, any reference to Skoolie building and tiny homes and so forth.
Right.
They removed the pictures of the solar install, which is evidence for the errors they made.
Yes.
So that was
But luckily
interesting.
you have screenshots of everything.
I've got screenshots, I've got video, I've got
Yes.
video screenshots, I've
Yeah.
got all kinds of stuff, including a video I took when I did a walkthrough with them where they were explaining the system to me.
Yeah.
Not only that, I have the manual for the charge controller that they left on the bus, so
Yes.
it proves that was the size charge controller that they, installed incorrectly and so forth. So there's plenty, without a doubt, evidence. So one
Right.
thing is these 2 avenues have been pursued, and these 2 entities, especially the consumer protection, function like a Better Business Bureau, right?
Yes.
They're going to try to mediate. They're going to try to do what Jonathan and I already did, which is submit some kind of
Right.
proposition and resolution, right?
Yes.
And I've also been in touch with a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
A woman lawyer, Rodis Law in Florida, and I want to say her name because she's fantastic. She offered, instead of a retainer, a flat fee for helping me work with the small claims court.
Okay.
And we discussed the case, and I felt really good about her services. And so if these 2 options don't lead us to a resolution, I have that. And
Right.
she and I have put like a start date a little bit later so that I can see how these go. So yeah, and that takes my time and energy, right?
Yes.
which is not where I wanted to spend my
No.
time and energy. But at the same time, I'm also somebody who wants people to be responsible, you
Yes.
know, for their commitments, and I want to pursue this. And another thing we talked about, and I say we, I'm talking about Jonathan again,
Yes.
is doing something like maybe a Q&A with someone like Chuck Cassidy or perhaps yourself,
Yes.
and do a small fundraiser where we could start to create a fund for people in my situation who've done all their due diligence but still find themselves, you know,
Right.
stuck. And this could offer a little bit of financial relief for this unexpected financial burden,
Yeah.
but also put it, you know, like somehow grow that fund so that other folks can benefit from it. So it's not just me,
Yeah.
it's other folks who need a little support for finding themselves in unfortunate extra finance because of someone else's negligence.
Right.
So, you know, I want to, and I've talked with Chuck myself, you know, briefly to help see if we
Yeah.
could help. He suggested that he might reach out to a mini split company that might provide a better
Better alternative. yeah.
alternative and like do the reinstall, because of course the mini split is installed behind my left rear tire.
Yes. Yeah.
So these things are in motion, and that gives me a lot of confidence, and you know, again, feel the support
Yes.
from the community to like make things right,
Yeah.
and hopefully help others so that they can be smart and hopefully make decisions that get
Yeah.
them to their dream.
And if there's a lawyer listening, instead of chasing ambulances and having the sign on the highway, "Are you in an accident?" Well, this might be a new avenue for you.
We need you.
Yes, exactly. So, unfortunately, there is a need. And what would with all this behind you, how would you vet a new builder?
That's a great question. So, I forgot to mention one other thing, and then I'll answer your question.
Yeah.
So, another step in my process is I am now staying on the Skoolie homestead,
Yeah.
where I'm working with Brett eventually to help remedy some of the things
Yeah.
that need attention, and you know, to create a priority list with him. And so that's my next step, like
Yeah.
getting that support. But the thing that's great about there is, like, again, I have a safe place to be.
Yes.
It's a community.
Yes.
There's Wi-Fi. There's the community house and so
Yeah.
on. So that makes me feel comfortable that I'm making progress on my journey, right?
Yeah. And we visited the Skoolie homestead in Jessup, Georgia. Like you say, it's a safe haven.
Yep.
It's a beautiful place, beautiful people. They're always, we mentioned we were somewhere near there, and I got a message from Brett saying, "Come, take a look, have fun," So yes, very much a nice, safe place.
So I would say for folks trying to move forward with a build, again, I think a lot of people do want to do this type of build because it is a more affordable option
Yes.
for this type of nomadic life. So I obviously put in two things. Make sure they're licensed
Yes.
and insured.
Right.
Make sure that you have a contract with clause about halt to build. Like if there's things going wrong, how do you manage that?
Right.
Have that very clear up front. And have like a parachute, like a way out.
Yeah.
It built into the contract, because again, if you're dealing with a small business, like what are your avenues? Perhaps interview more people. Like, remember when I met my folks, they were recommended to me by somebody I trusted.
Yes.
When I looked at their work and they showed me their pictures of the work they'd done before, it seemed legit. It looked good. It looked like what I wanted to have, right?
Yeah.
I've seen their own woodworking, which is what they've focused on before. It looked good. It
Yeah.
looked solid. So, and then another thing I did throughout my process that I would encourage people to do anyway is ask all the good questions, right? There's a lot of people on Skoolie Nation, Skoolie Planet forums. We've got lots of IG Skoolie folks who have a lot of good content
Yes.
on their builds. I actually was in contact with a couple of those folks via IG asking questions like,
Yes.
which toilet do you recommend? Which solar do you recommend? Is it enough to power this?
Yes.
I was doing a lot of my homework as well, so I would encourage whoever's wants to go forward, do that homework too.
Yes.
And make sure you have that conversation with your builder, which I did, but it wasn't a guarantee.
Yes.
But get everything more clearly in a proper contractual
In writing. Yeah.
document. Again, in my case, I had very clear estimates with lots of details, which technically legally functions as
A contract.
a contract, because at the bottom of the first estimate, it says this is for a bus build,
Yes.
which indicates, so as long as there's money being exchanged for a product, that constitutes a contract, right? So that's
Right.
legally binding. So that does protect me.
Yes.
So,
If they have the money to pay you back.
right.
Yeah, which is the other thing. From my point of view, another thing that needs to be done is not just call previous owners, but go visit. Even if,
absolutely.
flights are back to being regular, normal price. They're back to being not cheap, but inexpensive. And it's worth it to fly halfway across the country, spend a day, visit a new city, visit a bus, and sit down and talk to the people. Because over the phone, they might be, oh, everything was great. And they might like a ceiling that has 1/4-inch gaps.
Right. They might not care.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, more than 1/4-inch gaps. Everybody's perspective is different on what constitutes a quality build and what doesn't. One thing that jumps out at me is they actually used a piano hinge, which is a great thing. The piano hinge on the bathroom door, that's quality. Now, it's 2 feet too short, but they didn't just buy 2 cheap hinges and put them there and your door creaks every time you open it. So there's that. And did they make that door? Or?
Yep, they did.
Okay, so that's a nice looking door. It's artistic.
Absolutely.
They did a good job there. So yes, there are good qualities that have happened here. There are good things that have happened.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, there are bad things that have happened.
Exactly.
But luckily, you're moving forward with a positive attitude.
Yep.
We'll see you on the road. Do people have a way of following your journey?
Yeah, that would be great. I have an IG called Encounter America.
Yeah.
And it features my photography of all the places I visit, as well as, little stories here and there about the schooly life and the schooly events and, resources like that. And the other thing I'd recommend to add to the list of what to do, by the way, is not only talk to people, but when you're looking at pictures of things, don't just look at the aesthetics, but look at the underbelly, right? In addition. So, and anyway, back to keeping in touch. I'm on IG, and I probably will add a TikTok at some point as well. So Encounter America is where I can be found.
Very good. Thank you very much, Nicole, or Cole, however you...
Both work.
Yeah, both work. You answer to both. So
yes.
Thank you very much. And again, Encounter America on Instagram for now, and other platforms eventually. And you'll see how good this sad story turns out.
Here's to that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.